Before I begin, I'd like to just say a few words about the heartbreaking events in Tremont. On Sunday night, I got a message from our Commissioner of Public Safety that the unthinkable was unfolding in Tremont, and hoped for the best, but instead we got the worst possible news. Every night before I go to bed, I pray for our LEOs, our law enforcement officers across the state, that they'll all get home safely. And that night, two families got the tragic news that their husband and father, their son, would not be coming home. Utah lost two remarkable officers from the Tremont and Garland Police Department, Sergeant Lee Sorensen and Officer Eric Estrada. They truly embodied the very best of public servants. I've had an opportunity to spend time with both of their families. I've met their spouses, their kids, and I've met their friends and neighbors. And I'm just devastated. Two better individuals I don't know that exist in our state. Sergeant Sorensen served for 17 years in law enforcement and had just been promoted to sergeant, a reflection of the trust that he had earned from his fellow officers. He did more than just serve in law enforcement. He actually worked part-time for the medical examiner's office at the state. He was one of my employees. He was also recognized by the Tremont Fire Department with the Distinguished Service Award this year, and he and his wife received Garland City's Whelan Award for lasting contributions to the community. Officer Estrada served with his full heart in every assignment. His incredible wife Brittany told me that he got into law enforcement because he just loved people and he wanted to help people, and that's what he was doing when he lost his life. Colleagues and neighbors remember him as a dedicated husband and father who brought professionalism and kindness to the job every single day. We're also thinking of Deputy Mike Allred of the Box Elder County Sheriff's Office and his canine partner Azula. They were both wounded in the shootout. I just have to say that I got a chance to meet Deputy Allred and Azula as well. It's miraculous that they survived. A turn of the head at the exact moment that the bullet entered his vehicle likely saved his life, and he had no idea how badly he was injured, and yet he was able to remain calm and is a hero as he directed other officers who were rushing to the scene away from the line of fire, and likely saved additional lives that night. To the Sorensen and Estrada families, Abby and I and the entire state, we pray for you. We are here to support you, and I'm just so proud of Utah and the way that people have responded in Tremont and Garland, of course, in Box Elder County, of course, Cache County, where Officer Estrada is from, but so much more than that. Every corner of the state, there's been an outpouring of love and support and a reminder of what truly matters in this life, and how grateful we are for law enforcement officers that put themselves into harm's way every single day. As far as state law enforcement goes, it's been over 100 years since we've had two fatalities like this in a shooting with our law enforcement officers. So fortunately, this is something that does not happen very often here, and I'm grateful for that. But there's still evil in this world, and good people who are willing to stand in front of a bullet to protect the citizens of this state. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Governor, what are your thoughts on prosecutors planning to seek the death penalty in those officer killings?
I think it's very appropriate in this case, and I support that.
That was my question, but I have another one. This suspect was already have charged in the past. Do you think that the system failed?
Well, look, the system. When I get these questions, the answer can't always be when somebody does something wrong, we lock them up forever. That can't be the answer. So we're always trying to find balance in the system. There is a review that is happening of this person's background, history and background. Specifically around domestic violence charges before. We have made significant changes around domestic violence over the last couple of years with the legislature. And the question is, would those changes have impacted this in the past, potentially? And so we'll learn what we can from this to prevent it from happening in the future. I certainly hope that we have an opportunity to learn from it. And if mistakes were made and if we can strengthen the system, then we absolutely should. But it's impossible for any of us to predict what will happen. Lots of people make mistakes and don't shoot cops in cold blood. And so I don't know the details about this particular suspect and his mental state, but he deserves the death penalty.
Governor, on Monday, Trump announced he will lead an effort to get rid of mail-in voting by signing an executive order to help bring honesty to the 2026 midterm elections. And this is something that Senator Mike Lee said he supports, and your Lieutenant Governor said that states should continue to have the constitutional right to choose how they conduct secure elections. And so I'm wondering whether you think Trump's attempt to change mail-in voting from the federal level will improve election security across the country, or whether states should push back.
Yeah, so I think it's a little more nuanced answer on that. I think President Trump and all of us are right to be extremely cautious when it comes to mail-in voting. I've expressed those concerns in the past. Utah is an outlier when it comes to the way that we implemented vote by mail. The time that we took, the processes that we've gone through, the changes that we've made over time, including last year, to make sure that mail-in voting is safe. Most states who do mail-in voting did not do that. Most of the states that recently have implemented mail-in voting did it virtually overnight, almost literally overnight during COVID, without going through the process and the procedures. And so it's very reasonable for someone to see that and say vote by mail is problematic, and we need to make sure that that voting is secure, and not be able to say that all vote by mail is not the same. I'm very proud of our vote by mail system. I will tell you, I had a county commissioner who was recently elected come up to me just a couple weeks ago. Somebody who was deeply concerned about election integrity in our state, who had complained about election integrity in our state, who went and toured the election facility in his county, went through all of the steps, and came out as a defender of the way we do voting in the state. He said there's no way for mass fraud in this state. He said, I'm blown away, had no idea all the checks and balances that exist in the system. And I think that is really important. Look, it's not whether I think voting should be done by the states or not. The Constitution is very clear that it's in the purview of the states and not the federal government, and I think states should defend that. But we can do both things. We can defend the role of the states and be very serious about voter integrity. And I think more states need to be more serious about voting integrity. And of course, we're always happy to share with them the changes and the security features that we've implemented in Utah that would help them.
Governor, if President Trump does act to prohibit voting by mail, how far would Utah go to act to defend its authority to make laws around how it administers elections?
I don't. Again, I would have to see what that looks like, and the Constitution's very clear on this one. So we'll just have to see what that looks like.
Governor, in regards to Stuart Adams, do you think that there should be a third-party investigation, or at least a legislative ethics inquiry into the allegation against him?
What is the allegation against him?
The allegation that he...
is there something that needs to be investigated? Are there facts in dispute here?
Well, the allegation is that he promoted, and he's denied this, that he promoted legislation that would benefit a relative in a criminal case, and that President Adams has denied that, saying that's not the case.
Is there an allegation that he promoted it? What is the allegation?
The allegation
that he's denied.
The allegation is that he promoted legislation to benefit
To
a
whom?
relative in a criminal case.
To whom did he promote?
Pardon me?
To whom did he promote this legislation?
Well, as has been reported, he allegedly supported that legislation at the Capitol. The Speaker of the House is now convening a meeting of stakeholders to review whether that is the right policy. There have been rallies at the Capitol calling on the president to resign over this. There's a state senator and a Salt Lake County councilman.
You still haven't given me the allegation, though. To whom did he promote this?
But he abused his power.
Okay, there's how did he abuse his power? Who did he promote this to? Who did he talk about this to?
He talked about it to his Senate Majority Leader,
And they both admitted that. Is there anybody else? Is there an allegation that he promoted it to someone other than his?
That he talked to the defense attorneys, that he sent letters to the judge, that he...
Okay, that's very different. Those are two very different things. Again, I'm trying to understand. You're saying there's some allegation out there. I don't think there are any facts in dispute. I think the facts are very clear. He talked to the Senate Majority Leader. The Senate Majority Leader took that information. He went into and he proposed a piece of legislation. I found out about this case that you're referring to when I read the article. The Senate president never talked to me about this. I learned about it in the Salt Lake Tribune when Robert Gerke wrote that article.
Whether the allegation, whether you agree or disagree, whether there is merit to the allegation, or if there is any impropriety on behalf of the Senate president, there are some people who believe that there is. So the question is, should there be, in your view, a third-party review and/or investigation, or at least a legislative ethics inquiry into their concerns?
So I don't think there's nothing to investigate. The facts of this are very, very clear. The facts are abundantly clear. It's been reported. I don't think anybody's denied that what happened. As I mentioned, I learned about this when you all learned about it. Actually, some of you probably learned about it before I learned about the allegation. And so the question is, should he have told me about it? Should he have leaned on me? I would love to read the Salt Lake Tribune story about what would have happened if he had done that. I can only imagine how people would have reacted if he had done that. Look, there have been times in my term as governor when I've been so mad at Stuart Adams that I couldn't see straight on certain bills, and that has happened a couple of times. I can tell you that this is not one of those times. I'm very grateful that I had no idea that this was impacting someone in his family, his granddaughter's family, because it may have changed the way I reacted to the bill. And let me also be clear. Anybody who says they didn't know what was in that bill is lying to you, or they're a terrible legislator. This was not something that was hidden at all. This idea that this was something that was put in a bill at the last minute is absolutely not true. It's fundamentally not true, and it's verifiably not true. Now, the bill did come out late in the session. That part is true, not because of this provision in the bill, because this is an incredibly complex bill that lots of people were working on for months and months and months, really years going back. This provision was talked about multiple times. I knew this provision was in there, and so did every other legislator who read the bill. It was in the short title. It was brought up in every committee hearing. It was actually asked about on the House floor during the debate. So there is no controversy about whether people knew this was in the bill or not. The only question I have is this the right policy? And this is a really tough one, guys. This is a hard one. You have kids in high school being treated differently depending on where their birthday falls during the year. And if their birthday falls in May instead of June, then they get treated the same as a 50-year-old who had a sexual relationship with a 13-year-old. And that's the question. Is that fair? Some people think that that is fair. that something magical happens the minute you turn 18 and you are an adult, and what you do should be treated the same. The legislature debated this, and before the legislature, we had these groups together working on these policies, giving their input when this came forward. And when it was presented to me, I paused on it. I had to ask myself, is this the right policy? It makes sense, I think, to treat 17 and 18-year-olds, and let me be clear, to give the judge the opportunity. This is not mandated in law, but to give the judge the opportunity to treat an 18-year-old the same as a 17-year-old instead of a 50-year-old. So the only question I had for me is this the right policy? And it was a close call. Maybe it's not the right policy. Maybe now that we have an opportunity to reflect on it, maybe it doesn't go far enough, or it goes too far. And that's what we do. That's the process. Every single legislator has experiences in their life where they see something that they feel may be unjust, and that influences the way they bring legislation to the table. Again, I have lots of reasons to get upset with Stuart Adams. This was not one of them. I'm really grateful he never talked to me about it.
Would you support the policy if this was an 18-year-old boy who had sex with a 13-year-old girl?
Yeah, so again, that's a very interesting part of this whole discussion, right, is that nobody knew that was the case. And I've asked myself that question too. It's funny when I tell people, everybody assumed from the article that it was a grandson, not a granddaughter. I don't think it should matter, but for some reason, everybody I talk to, it does.
Governor,
so again, that's the question that's why I said it's a really close call. I also want to be clear, and this is the part where I think nuance is completely lost. This doesn't let them off the hook with a slap of a hand. Still a third-degree felony. This is serious, serious stuff we are talking about. And in this case, again, the law didn't even apply to his granddaughter. So look, guys, there are no easy answers to this one. But I'm just grateful that Stuart Adams did not bring this to my attention, that I signed the bill based on the policy. I will say it's very fascinating to me that the very people calling for his resignation actually support the bill. Let's move on. Next question.
I do want to clarify, though. Do you think, if you were in Stuart Adams' position, do you think he acted inappropriately? Do you think it was proper for someone in the top position of the Senate to weigh in on the outcome of this bill?
I think it was appropriate for the top person in the Senate not to weigh in on this bill, which is exactly what happened.
So he did nothing wrong here.
I just said what I think is appropriate is that he did not weigh in on this bill. And I can only imagine what you would have written, Emily, if he had.
Governor, I want to ask about berm management in the Great Salt Lake. Yes. Obviously, it's on the special session agenda. But is that enough, especially with water levels continuing to fall, as well as state agencies reporting that water usage is spiking?
Sure. No, it's not enough. It's definitely not enough. But it is one of the tools that we definitely need to use. And you're going to be hearing more from us on more that we can do around the Great Salt Lake. Look, the Great Salt Lake is an incredible gem for our state. It's critical, again, economically, ecologically. I've been very fortunate to be able to spend some time out on the shores of the Great Salt Lake recently, and the migratory birds and the refuge that's out there is so important to everything that we are. Look, our capital city is named after that lake. It's not just a feature of our state. It's core to who we are as human beings, and it's worth protecting. I'm grateful for a legislature that has stepped up in big ways over the past few years to save the lake. We're still working through those bills to shepherd more water to the end, but we are being successful. This year, for example, mineral companies haven't been able to take as much water as they normally have because of a bill that we signed last year that prohibited that from happening. And so we've seen a huge change in behavior that is going to help the lake over the next several years. And again, some of that is voluntary behavior, but a lot of that is legislation that we passed, changing over 160 years of water law in this state. But we're not done, and so we'll keep working through that. But there are some temporary engineering measures that we can do to preserve life around the Great Salt Lake, and the salinity of the lake is part of that, and being able to raise and lower the berm is part of that as well. We've made some changes in the past. This is one that we wanted to do earlier, and we got some pushback, and now that pushback has recognized that that we were right and we should make that change.
Governor, the execution of Ralph Menzies is coming up, and his attorneys say it would be, quote, a grotesque spectacle to shoot a man with dementia. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, I don't make those decisions. We have a board and a process that will make those decisions, whether there is dementia or not. Those are facts that are in dispute. A panel and then judges reviewing all of these decisions will decide whether there is dementia or not. And I'm grateful that I don't have to make that call, but I'm grateful that we have a process that does. I can tell you that there is nothing more thorough than the death penalty process in our country. There are so many levels and layers of appeals and opportunities there. And so if those appeals are denied because the evidence does not support an allegation of dementia, then we will move forward as required by law.
Governor? Is Utah among the 20 states that the Secretary of Defense says will be activating National Guard personnel to assist ICE agents? And also, will you be sending any of those National Guard personnel to help out in D.C.?
So I'll answer the second question first. We have not received any communication about help in D.C. So I'm not aware of any requests there. As a dual authority state, like other states, the federal government does have the opportunity to call up the National Guard. The president does have that authority. What we've said from the very beginning is this: that we are willing to work to support the efforts to remove people who are here illegally. However, with a couple caveats there, that it would only be in a support role. So our National Guard will not be putting hands on people, will not be arresting people. That is not the role of the National Guard, and we would not allow that to happen. We've offered in the past, because we've had problems, to help with things like transport, because we don't have an ICE facility here. Transportation takes a lot of time and effort away from Homeland Security and their ability to do their jobs, processing paperwork, those types of things that make it difficult. We've offered to help there. So those are where we would be able to help. So that was condition number one. Condition number two is that the federal government has to pay for this, that it can't come out of state funding. And so so we're in active communication with the federal government. And by the way, I think that's true of most states, that's the way most states are feeling about this. And so we'll know in the next couple weeks what that looks like as they get more information back to us, and we'll be able to make that decision.
As far as President Trump deploying the National Guard to Washington, D.C., and raising the possibility of deploying the National Guard to other cities throughout the country, is that something that you would sign off on if he asked the Utah National Guard to assist in that?
Well, we won't need I hope we never need the Utah National Guard. We've deployed here before when we've had riots and property damage that was happening here in the state of Utah when people's lives were at risk. We're hoping we don't need to do that here, that we'll be able to. I don't anticipate that the president would call up the National Guard from one state to go into another state. I think, again, he would have the authority to call up the National Guards in those states. And so our job is to make sure that we're doing our job so that we don't need the National Guard here in Utah.
If he did attempt to do that, though, would you sign off on that?
I would have to see what that looks like. Okay.
Do you support the U.S. decision to send warships near the coast of Venezuela?
Look, I'm not as read in on what's happening in Venezuela right now. I know there are some deep concerns. There are lots of concerns happening all over the world. Of course, we're seeing deployments happening in the Middle East, in Asia. Certainly, these decisions impact Utahns. We are a service-oriented state. We have a very high level of participation participation when it comes to the military and the National Guard. And so anytime there is active military incursions happening anywhere in the world, it impacts Utahns. So always concerned, but I just have to say I'm not read in enough to make an informed decision on what's happening in Venezuela.
I want to ask you about the proof of citizenship conversation that's happening around the country.
Sure, yeah.
Some voters' rights groups have reached out to us. They're wondering if that could be in the special session. Is that something you've already been consulted on? Have you been read in on it?
Yeah, so conversations about the special session are just starting to happen. Obviously, I feel very strongly that only, in fact, in Utah, it is illegal for anyone who is not a citizen of the United States to vote, and we want to make sure that we have processes in place to prevent that from happening. And if it is happening, we need to root that out. There have been reports that maybe there were 2 cases of some potential illegal votes. If that happen, then those should be prosecuted, and so we'll be working with county attorneys on that. We're constantly looking to update our voting laws to make sure that we're protecting people and protecting the sanctity of those voter rolls. And so I don't know if that's something that's going to come up in a special session or in the general session, but I know those discussions are happening. And so if there is a proposal that is ready for a special session, it could possibly happen. If not, more likely that we would do that in January.
And that's all the time that we have for our television broadcast. Thank you for joining us for the Governor's Monthly News Conference. And Governor, we do have a remote reporter with a question, Christine Weller with KPCW. Christine, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, my question is about the Winter X Games. Colorado's contract with the X Games is expiring after this year, and Park City is a contender to host the 2027 Winter X Games. I saw that you have a call with X Games CEO Jeremy Bloom later today. I'm wondering, could the Winter X Games be coming to Utah, and do you have any what might this call be about? Sure.
Yeah. So we're big fans of the X Games personally and as a state. And Utah is the headquarters of winter sports for really all of North America. And we're excited to have the Olympics coming back in 2034. We are big supporters of the X Games. We would love to see more of that happening here. And that's certainly going to be part of the conversation, is just to see what the future looks like for the X Games, what their numbers look like here. We had an incredible event here recently in Salt Lake City and out at the fairgrounds, and just great support for the X Games. So we'll continue to meet and have those conversations, and anytime we can attract more sporting events to Utah, that's something we're in favor of. It's good for the economy, it's good for our people, it's good for our athletes, and we have a lot of X Games athletes that live and train in Utah, and we want to be supportive of them as well.
Governor, yesterday Senator Wilson said that you support the compromise bill on selecting the state's next Chief Justice. Is that true, and do you support the bill in its current form? So we've been having several discussions about this bill since I issued the veto, and you'll remember, actually probably nobody remembers, but when I issued that veto, I was clear about a couple things, my reasoning for doing that. Our judicial system is based very closely on the national system, the federal system. And I said in that case, the president does choose the Chief Justice. And so I could support the governor choosing the Chief Justice. But what they had proposed, and why I was so concerned, was this rolling 4-year reappointment. And I felt like that would require the Chief Justice to look over their shoulder and maybe to compromise their independence to make decisions because they would be worried about what the governor thought or what the Senate thought, because they would have to be reconfirmed every 4 years, which is a fairly short time frame for our judiciary. I care deeply about the independence of the judiciary, but that the judiciary is not immune from checks and balances. They are part of checks and balances, but having that constant that constant oversight by the governor and the Senate was not something I was interested in. I did say in the letter, however, that
if there was a proposal that allowed for the governor to choose, much like the president, then that is something I could get behind. So those discussions have been ongoing. They decided not to push to override my veto in light of the conversations that were happening. And where we settled on was a 10-year a 10-year term for a chief justice with no reappointment. And the reason I like that is once the chief justice is appointed, then there's no looking over their shoulder. They are completely independent to work with the court as they desire. I know that is something that the judiciary felt better about than the earlier bill, and so I said I would be willing to support that, meeting those demands, so that we still have an independent chief justice moving forward.
The bill says 8 years, not 10 years. So do they need to change that?
No. We had talked about 10, and I've said, sorry, 8 is the number we landed on, not 10. I apologize. I'm thinking back to earlier discussions. We started at 10 and ended at 8, which actually matches up with their terms, which makes sense for as they go through their own judicial retention process, and that was the reason we ended up at that number. So look, I would have loved 10 more than 8, but 8's so much better than 4, and that's how these processes work. So getting the one term, I think, really matters, and will I also just want to point out that while the Chief Justice does have a level of authority, all of the justices are independent to vote. It's not clear that, and we don't see this, that I think we put a little too much weight on the idea of the Chief Justice. They're much more of an administrator than anything to do with the actual decisions that are being delivered, and so I just want to be very clear to people about what this means and what it doesn't mean. But this allows us to maintain the independence of the Chief Justice once they're chosen, and that was very, very important to me.
Can we expect that in a special session next month?
I think so. I think that's what we're planning on right now, and that's why it was presented in the session yesterday.
Can you elaborate, though, on why this change is needed? Because so far, the only reasoning I've heard from some senators is, well, the judiciary, the Supreme Court isn't getting enough decisions out in a timely manner. How does this change fix that? Because the speculation and the accusation out there is this is just political because the legislature doesn't like some of the decisions the Supreme Court has made.
Sure. Well, I'm sure there are some of that the legislature does not, and what we're trying to find here is the balance. Again, we want an independent judiciary, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any checks or balances. And one of those checks at the federal level, which is why I said I would support it, because we are based on the federal system, is one of those checks is that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is appointed by the President of the United States. And so this does give another two branches of government an opportunity to weigh in and let the independent branch know how they're seeing things. It will give them an opportunity to have a conversation about the backload of cases that are out there. I just want to be very clear, though. As I travel the country and we talk to other governors, we talk to other legislators, we talk to other members of the judiciary, we talk to think tanks. We have the best system right now in the state. It's not perfect, and so we're always tinkering around the edges a little bit to improve it. But I'm very proud of our judiciary, even when I disagree with them. And I've disagreed with them profoundly on some cases recently. But it is possible to disagree profoundly and still recognize that they are doing very, very good work. So the question is has there been a little bit of an imbalance right now, and can we balance that a little bit? Again, I'm responding to a legislature who believes very strongly in this, much more strongly than I do. If it was up to me, I would have left it alone, but it's not up to me. They can run bills, and maybe they could have overridden my veto, maybe not. But with this change, and I had already signaled to them that I could support it if there were changes made, and they've been willing to make those changes, and so that's why I support it.
Could that bill wait until a general session?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it could, but part of the discussions, again, the back and forth that happens between the executive and the legislative branches. So there were some bills that I didn't like that I signed. They promised to change them in a special session. There were some bills that I vetoed that they didn't like that I promised I would review in a special session. So that's. I mean, it could wait until January. There's nothing pressing coming up, especially if you look at the deadlines that are already in there. The Chief Justice will continue in his role. We're not going to immediately appoint a Chief Justice.
There was a survey results. These are a preliminary inquiry by legislative auditors. Results released this week in a legislative audit committee related to Utah State University. And among other things, legislative auditors found that purchase card transactions have significantly increased in the president's office in the past 5 years compared to the previous 5. Also, vehicle expenses have also gone way up. How concerned are you about the lack, potentially, of purchasing protocols by Utah State, and should the state exert more influence at USU? Sure. So this is why we do audits, and the purpose of audits are to see if there are controls in place, and if things are happening like this where numbers are going up without any explanation. And so we review those audits. We shared the concerns that the legislature shared in seeing those audits, and we will work with Utah State to make sure that those are corrected. That's what we do, and that's what we've always done in an audit. And so we part of the executive branch, although the higher education is a little bit independent. We appoint the board. The Board of Higher Education is the entity. I appoint the board members, confirmed by the Senate. They will oversee those audits, and the legislature as well. And so we'll make sure that those get corrected. That's our job, is to make sure that those get corrected, and we will.
Governor, amid all these discussions about redistricting across the country, I wonder whether you support redistricting more frequently than once every 10 years, potentially to change the outcome of midterm elections, and whether you support doing a census more frequently than once every 10 years and not including non-citizens.
Yeah, so some of you may be familiar with the concept of Chesterton's fence, and Chesterton was a philosopher, a great human being, and he posited this idea of the proverbial fence. You buy a piece of property that has a fence there, and you think, why do we have a fence there? That's a dumb thing. And then you tear down the fence, and the next day the neighbor's cows are in your garden eating it, and you realize, oh, there was a reason that fence was there. Sometimes I think we make changes to long-standing norms and policies, and not realizing the consequences of those changes to those norms and policies. I fear that this may be one of those. We are so polarized as a country with the trust in institutions falling. I can't see a scenario where every 2 or 4 years we're redistricting. I can't see a scenario where that makes life better for anybody. And we just see the escalation that continues to happen. Oh, the Democrats did this, so we're going to do this, and oh, the Republicans did this, so we're going to do this, and it just continues to ratchet up the toxicity and the stakes, quite frankly. And so I think I would be very cautious about doing that.
Excluding non-citizens from the census to make sure that's not figured into electoral college.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. That piece has always bothered me a bit, that non-citizens are factored into the electoral college. Now, I will say that at least the last study I saw that was done on that, the changes would be very, very minor. It may be like 1 seat in California, something like that. So I don't know that that's a huge thing. I think you would still do the census and then just exclude those numbers, because I think it is important to understand where people are, and the census is important in doing that. So I wouldn't exclude people from the census, because we want to know that. But the question is whether the Constitution allows that or not, whether the Constitution requires it, and that will be up to a federal court to decide.
Governor, The former head of the Utah National Guard, Michael Turley's retirement rank was knocked down to lieutenant colonel by the Army earlier this month, and now he's suing you alleging wrongful termination and claiming misconduct allegations are utterly baseless. I'm curious what your take is on the Army Grade Determination Review Board's decision and Turley's accusations against you.
Yeah, well, sadly, because there is a lawsuit, I can't talk about that one.
Yeah.
I want to follow up on a question I asked you earlier about the Great Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Special session aside, general session aside, now as you're working towards this legislatively, if it doesn't reach a level in which you're comfortable, would you consider an executive order?
Well, sure. So I've used an executive order in the past when it comes to new water development in the Great Salt Lake Basin. And so we've used our authority there before. I will say that under existing law, I can only issue executive orders for 30 days, and then the legislature would have to step in and do that. And so anything I would do that would have any long-term impact would have to be done with the help of the legislature. And so that's really where our focus is working with the legislature, again, working with water share holders across the basin to figure out ways that we can reduce water usage and get more water to the lake and encourage innovation, which we're doing. I'm really grateful for farmers and ranchers who have stepped up in a big way. And again, the legislature using funding that we've been able to set aside to improve and upgrade the technology so that they're using less water. Now we've just got to make sure that the extra water gets to the lake, and that's a process we're still working through, but we are getting closer on that. So if there was a case where an executive order could make a substantial difference, then we would consider it. But I'm struggling to think of any situation where we would need something for less than 30 days without the legislature weighing in.
Sticking on water policy for a minute,
Sure.
Colorado River, Lake Mead, Lake Powell, obviously continuing to fall. How confident are you that Utah's voice is being heard on a national stage when it comes to water conservation?
So I'm very confident that our voice is being heard, more so than before. If you'd asked me that question 5 years ago, I'm not sure I could have answered that in the affirmative. We have we created the office of the Colorado River Authority here in this state, and we've been able to bring the very best minds in the state to work on this. And what I can tell you now is that our state is leading in this space with other states. We're running models for them, upper basin, lower basin states, just as we try to work through this together in a collaborative fashion. This is the one river basin that has not had it has not been decided or decreed by a judge via dispute, and we would love to keep it that way. It's tough right now. There's a divide between the upper basin states and the lower basin states, and we've been meeting regularly for the last couple years trying to work this out. The last meeting was a tough one, and there's still some distance between those two. Our voices are unified as an upper basin, though. So it's not just Utah's voice being heard. It's Utah and Wyoming and Colorado, right? We're all working together when it comes to those voices. We've had lots of conversations with the Secretary of the Interior about this and how this is going to be decided. Next year is go time. That's when the compact has to be renegotiated, re-signed, and so. The problem is if we don't come to an agreement, the federal government will, and they'll make the decision for us. And we might like that decision, we might not like that decision. But the one thing we know is that the hydrology of the river has not kept up with with what we thought it was going to be, and we know that the lower basin is using much more than their share. And those are the two facts that are indisputable. How you get to from A and B to C, that's still up in the air.
Governor, because of the big, beautiful bills.
Do you have any appetite for a tax cut?
Oh, I always have an appetite for a tax cut.
What kind of tax cut?
Well, I've got to see the numbers, and the numbers will determine what that tax cut looks like. And what we can see right now from our economists is that the economy is slowing down a bit. I mean, it's we'll see what the next few months bring as we start to look at receipts, and then as our economists start to kind of formulate what a budget next year would look like.
So tougher right now.
Yeah, right now would be tougher for a big tax cut. I've cut taxes every year since I've been governor, and I'd love to keep going, but this one could be a little tougher.
Because of the Big Beautiful Bill's impact on SNAP and the shifting costs to states, fiscal analysts say that Utah lawmakers will have to find some $13 million to fill those funding gaps for that program. What are your thoughts on that, and where do you think that money should come from?
Well, those conversations are still happening, and those estimates are really rough right now. Until we get guidance from the federal government, it's going to be hard for us to know exactly what that number looks like. So we'll also have some savings in some other places, and so it's possible we'll have some Medicaid savings. It's possible that it could come there. I don't know for sure. Ultimately, that the legislature will be the ones as the holders of the purse. We'll work hard with them to decide what stays and what doesn't stay. I will say we're very fortunate because we have implemented our SNAP program to the highest standards, we don't have the same problems that other states are having, where they're going to lose major dollars because they haven't been able to get rid of kind of the waste, fraud, and abuse in their SNAP systems. But we have, so we're less worried about that piece because our rates are much more solid than most other states.
Governor,
you mentioned right there.
Okay, thanks everybody. Have a wonderful August. We'll mention that we've got kids going back to school last week and this week. Please be careful out there as you're driving around. We've got school buses, lots of kiddos. We want them to be safe. No cell phones in classrooms, which we love. We hope they have a wonderful school year, and hope you have an enjoyable end of summer. Thanks everyone.